Welcome to Office Hours. Have I got a story for you? You know, I'm a medievalist, and one of my favorite parts of the Middle Ages is the 12th century. So the protagonist of our story is a fellow named Peter Abelard. Peter Abelard was the first son born to a minor baron from northwestern France, today what we call Brittany. Peter Abelard, as the first son, stood to inherit his father's estate and his vocation as a knight, as an aristocratic warrior. But from early on, Peter Abelard tells us that he made a decision to exchange the arms of Mars, that is the aristocratic and knightly profession, for the arms of Minerva, that is to say the vocation of a scholar. And as a young man, he left his home, having abandoned his inheritance to a younger brother, and he made for the heart of the kingdom of France, where at Paris, intellectual life in the early 12th century was exploding. At cathedral schools, at collegiate schools, where there was a revival of the study of the 7 liberal arts. Peter Abelard went and sat at the feet of the greatest masters of the day, men like William of Champeaux or Anselm of Laon. But this was a different educational environment than the monastic school of the early Middle Ages. This was a more rough and tumble environment where young students could distinguish themselves by standing up in the middle of a lecture, asking the professor to explain himself on a point that was obscure, and if the professor failed to do this adequately, he stood to lose his reputation, his students, and their student fees. Peter Abelard was bright and successful as a student, and some might say too successful. After he challenged his professors in a few public debates and defeated them and attracted the loyalty of their students, Peter Abelard tells us that his name was on the lips of every bright young student in Paris. At the same time, though, he had attracted the undying hatred of his former masters. Peter Abelard was very successful in his early career as a scholar, perhaps too successful. As he himself wrote to a friend of his later on, this is what he says: "Success always puffs up fools with pride, and worldly security weakens the spirit's resolution and easily destroys it through carnal temptations. I began to think myself the only philosopher in the world, with nothing to fear from anyone, and so I yielded to the lusts of the flesh." Turns out that Peter Abelard had become aware of a bright young woman in the city of Paris. She was being educated prodigiously by her uncle, who was regular clergy at the Cathedral of Notre Dame. This young woman's name was Heloise, and I quote again from Peter: "There was in Paris at the same time a young girl named Heloise, the niece of Fulbert, one of the canons, and so much loved by him that he had done everything in his power to advance her education and letters. In looks she did not rank lowest, while in the extent of her learning she stood supreme. A gift for letters is so rare in women that it added greatly to her charm and had made her most renowned throughout the realm. I considered all the usual attractions for a lover and decided she was the one to bring to my bed, confident that I should have an easy success. For at that time I had youth and exceptional good looks, as well as my great reputation to recommend me. And I feared no rebuff from any woman I might choose to honor with my love. Knowing the girl's knowledge and the love of letters, I thought she would be all the more ready to consent, and that even when separated, we could enjoy each other's presence by exchange of written messages, in which we could write many things more audaciously than we could say them, and so need never lack the pleasures of conversation." So, on fire with desire for this young woman, Peter Abelard introduced himself to her uncle Fulbert, and he offered himself up as a tutor to his niece. From Fulbert's perspective, this was an offer that he couldn't refuse. Here was the greatest scholar in the Kingdom of France offering to tutor his young niece. And so what happened next? Here's the words of Peter Abelard himself. "Need I say more? We were united, first under one roof, then in heart. And so with our lessons as a pretext, we abandoned ourselves entirely to love. Her studies allowed us to withdraw in private, as love desired, and then with our books open before us, more words of love than of our reading passed between us, and more kissing than teaching. My hand strayed oftener to her bosom than to the pages. Love drew our eyes to look on each other more than reading kept them on our texts. To avert suspicion, I sometimes struck her, but these blows were prompted by love and tender feeling rather than anger and irritation, and were sweeter than any balm could be. In short, our desires left no stage of love-making untried, and if love could devise something new, we welcomed it. We entered on each joy the more eagerly for our previous inexperience, and were the less easily sated. So things went on like this for a few months, but the affair couldn't be kept secret forever. First of all, Peter Abelard was devoting so much time to Heloise that his career as a scholar was suffering. He talks to us in his letter about how he would be so tired from lovemaking the night before that he was barely sufficiently awake to deliver his lectures to his students. He also says that when he was lecturing, he would invent ingenious syllogisms that hinted at his love for Heloise. For instance, the proposition that he would be defending is Abelard loves his girl. He tells us that he spent more time writing love poetry than writing philosophical treatises, and he claims that his love poetry was so popular that it was being sung by students around Paris. Now, by now you get the sense that Peter Abelard is a very confident person. Whether his love poetry was that good or not raises some questions, but it's an interesting insight. Eventually, the uncle Fulbert caught Heloise and Peter Abelard in delicto flagrante, and it soon became apparent that Heloise was carrying Peter Abelard's child. The distraught uncle, who felt completely betrayed, attempted to separate Peter Abelard from Heloise, but that only made them the more eager to find each other in any way they can and have secret trysts. Eventually, as the pregnancy progressed, Peter Abelard decided that he had to spirit Heloise away from her uncle's house for her safety, and so he sent her back home to his family estate in northwestern France. This is where Heloise gave birth to their son, and they named the boy Astrolabe. Now, Astrolabe is named for a new kind of technology that had been introduced into the Kingdom of France just recently. It was used for plotting the course of the stars. So it's kind of like if they were around today, they would have named their kid iPad or Cybertruck or something like that. After the birth of Astrolabe, Peter Abelard attempts to make up with the wronged uncle Fulbert, to come to terms with him. He promises Heloise's uncle that he will do the right thing, that he will marry Heloise and take care of her and the child as his wife and son. Fulbert is satisfied by this. However, when Peter informs Heloise of the plan, according to Peter Abelard, she objected strenuously. In her view, for Peter Abelard to get married would be for him to upend his academic career, to ruin his vocation as a scholar. In Heloise's perspective, and again, it's all recorded by Peter Abelard, right? But Heloise said, "You are a gift of God to the world. You're mind. How is it the case that I can keep you to myself?" She goes on to say to him, what does changing dirty diapers have to do with the search for wisdom? What kind of philosophical work can you get done when there are babies crying in the house? She tells Peter Abelard that she would be much more contented to remain his concubine than to become his wife. Peter Abelard insists they must get married, and she's finally convinced. So, at a clandestine wedding in Paris with a small group of people, Peter Abelard and Heloise marry. The uncle is satisfied, at least initially. After this marriage, Peter Abelard goes back to his teaching, and Heloise goes back to her uncle's house, and they only see each other occasionally. However, the uncle, who still feels wronged by what Peter Abelard had done to his niece, decides to start to spread the word that Heloise is in fact married to the most famous scholar of the age. Heloise doesn't like this because she wanted to keep the marriage secret so that Peter Abelard could carry on with his academic life without any kind of obstacles. When she tells her uncle to stop spreading the word, her uncle becomes abusive towards her, violent. This is why Peter Abelard tells us that he decides to rescue Heloise from her uncle's household by sending her to a convent. This is the convent of Argenteuil, and it was here that Heloise, as a little girl, had been educated. She's not supposed to take the veil of a nun, but she's dressed in the habit of a nun. When Fulbert realizes what Peter Abelard has done, he becomes convinced that Peter is trying to ditch Heloise in a convent, and so he decides to take action into his own hands. This is perhaps the climactic moment of Peter Abelard's account of his own miseries. He tells us that Fulbert and his kinsmen, wild with indignation, swore an oath against me. And one night, as I slept peacefully in an inner room in my lodgings, they bribed one of my servants to admit them. And there they punished me with a most cruel and shameful vengeance of such appalling barbarity as to shock the whole world. They cut off the parts of my body whereby I had committed the wrong of which they complained. And then they fled away, leaving Peter Abelard with his wounds, and we are told by Peter, all of the students of Paris, hearing the news of the attack, gathered outside of his lodgings to express their grief. After the castration, Peter Abelard decides to go into early retirement in the monastery of Saint-Denis. Meanwhile, Heloise, figuring out what has happened, decides to take the veil of a nun, so she also embraces religious life. Now, the interesting thing, and we can see this from their correspondence subsequently, is that definitely in Heloise's mind, they're still married, and she will still address Peter Abelard even after he's become a monk, even after he's been ordained a priest as her lord. So Peter Abelard has a little bit of a difficult time at the Abbey of Saint-Denis. He claims that the monks are a bit lax, that they don't observe the Benedictine rule very carefully. And he himself feels like he's been discarded, rejected, that his career as a scholar has been fatally interrupted. Well, he's approached by some of his former students and some of the monks of the monastery who beg Peter Abelard to take up again his teaching. Don't let this stop you from sharing your gift. Peter Abelard is finally won over. He decides that he will once again lecture and teach, though now he determines to dedicate himself wholly to the mysteries of theology and of the scriptures. He believes that this is what he must do now in order to make up to God for his sins in the past. As it turns out, Peter Abelard, as a teacher of theology, is no less controversial than Peter Abelard the philosopher or Peter Abelard the lover. He ends up applying his philosophical method of dialectic reasoning. This is, of course, something that is going to be part and parcel to the scholastic method that is just now taking off in the environment of the cathedral schools in the Kingdom of France. But this method of dialectic reasoning applied to the supreme mysteries of the Christian faith, above all the Holy Trinity. Peter Abelard writes a book on the Holy Trinity that gains notoriety throughout France very quickly, popular with his students, but also it falls under the suspicion of charismatic and influential churchmen of the day, especially and above all, Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux convinces the ecclesiastical authorities to put together a council where they will sit in judgment over Peter Abelard and the statements that he has written in his book about the Trinity. Among other things, they accuse him of teaching tritheism, that the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit are, as it were, three separate deities. Peter Abelard does his best to defend himself, convinced as he is of his orthodoxy at this council, but at the end of the day, he is forced with his own hand to surrender his book to the flames, and he says that as he gives this book on the Trinity over to the fire, he himself can't hold back his tears. So after Peter Abelard has his theological work on the Trinity burned, he retires into the wilderness where he builds a hermitage that he names in honor of the Holy Spirit, the Paraclete, the Consoler. After this, he decides to take an invitation to come serve as the abbot of a community of monks back in his home country, which he does with some reluctance. And this involves him in trouble with his monks. There are certain instances that he relates in this letter where the monks attempt to kill him by poisoning the communion wine as he offers the Mass or by holding a dagger to his throat. Meanwhile, Peter Abelard hears that Heloise, his wife, has been expelled from her monastery, her convent, along with her sisters, and so he actually donates his Hermitage of the Paraclete to Heloise. Heloise and her nuns resettle at this hermitage, and they begin their life anew. Peter Abelard does everything he can to provide them with material and spiritual support, for which he is accused by some of his enemies of trying to rekindle his old love affair. And Peter Abelard can't understand this because he says, I don't have testicles anymore. How can I be accused of that? But anyways, we know all of this information because Peter Abelard himself wrote it down in a letter, which he entitled Historia calamitatum. This was addressed to a friend of his who was going through some difficult circumstances. The point of the letter was to show his friend that no matter how difficult his challenges are, they must pale in comparison to the misfortunes that Peter Abelard himself has suffered. And so Peter hopes that his friend will find consolation in reading about his own calamities. And so we have one of the most sensational stories from the 12th century that you have never heard of. And if you would like to go see Heloise's side of the story, you can consult her letters, which we have extant as well. Thank you very much for joining me in office hours.